stay on camera, whatever your preference is. I think the actual recording, I think it's just my face and the slides. So I think unless you ask a question, you'll probably just not appear on the recording. So let's whiz on through. I think I know most people on the call or have met you at some point virtually or in reality, but my name's Gideon. I run a research consultancy. It's called Customer IQ. I've had a good innings of experience in the research industry, and the business is focused on helping founders and startups. I'll come back a little bit towards the end for a little bit more detail about me, the word from our sponsors, but I want to kind of jump straight into the content. So, there should be a photo of the book here that's already missing. That's good, isn't it? It's disappeared from the slide. Anyway, imagine, if you will, the cover of the MOM test on this slide. And the reasons for kind of picking this as a topic was firstly because I really like the book, and there's loads of really good content to take out of the book. But so a comment like this one really kind of made me think, can't wait to put this book into practice. And it's like, well, how practical, how can you do that? We all read business books, we all kind of soak up that knowledge, but how easy is it to turn that into kind of practice and turn that into practical next steps? There it is. Look, there's the picture. Brilliant. Spent ages on that. So you need a plan, right? If you're going to turn anything into action, you need a plan. This is my plan. This is kind of my process that I go through when I run a research project. I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm not going to kind of go through each stage, but these are the kind of questions I guess I'm asking myself, I'm asking my clients at these kind of points in the process. So, why are we doing this? Would be a good first question. How will we do it? What questions will we ask, etc., etc. But if we boil down research to its kind of basic parts, its simplest parts, I do believe it's pretty much as straightforward as taking some questions, delivering them to some people, and listening and taking notes, and if you're doing that, it's research. So if you're on a sales call and you're asking some interesting probing questions about your client or prospective customer, that's a bit of research. And I think sales calls are a very good, useful source of information and insight about customers. So that's what I would suggest if you're thinking about contemplating doing research, then think about it in these kind of simple terms. You need questions, you need a way of delivering those questions, and you obviously need people as well. So the MOM test for me, and I love the book. I wish Rob Fitzpatrick was on the call and I could tell him how much I love the book, but unfortunately I think he's probably busy. I love the book. It's what I think it's really, really good at is helping us, collectively to ask better questions and to listen more. And I will go into a bit more detail about that. I'll take out, kind of show you some of the best bits of the book. What I think it's probably, for me at least, not so great on is thinking about how you might deliver those questions and thinking about getting hold of the people to deliver those questions. For me, the book takes a sort of bit of a turn halfway through, and it kind of turns into a sales kind of manual, a sales book. And I'll come on to talk about this later, but personally, I always feel like research and sales conversations should be separated. Although I just did kind of contradict myself and say that sales calls are a good source of insight. I think if you're going to plan a research project, do a research project. If you're going to do some sales activity, do some sales activity. I'll come back to that more later. So in terms of questions, what are the kind of my takeouts from the book? Not just these, but these are the kind of some of the things that really stood out to me. So this was the kind of in a nutshell what I think Rob is trying to get at with his book, and how he's trying to inform us. So when you're talking to the people about your idea, talk about them, don't talk about your idea. Understand them, their problem, their frustrations, the kind of emotions that are driven out of this frustration, and really dig into that don't talk to them about your idea, at least to begin with. And I think that's really, really interesting, really true. Ask specifics that happened in the past instead of generics or opinions about the future. So yeah, ground your questions in reality. Ask them about their recent experience of doing this, that, or the other. Don't ask them about, what do you think you might do next year, or where do you think you might go on holiday next year. You're not going to get particularly good data from that, because you're asking questions that people are going to find difficult to answer truthfully. Talk less and listen more. Absolutely. I think there's a real tendency to kind of fill space in that kind of interview scenario. I would really support that, and I would say put more silence into those conversations. When you inject a little bit of silence, it might feel slightly uncomfortable, but what it does, it encourages people to say more. So you don't have to ask them, tell me more about that. If they give you something and then you just put in the pause, what you'll find is that they feel compelled to say something else, and they'll offer you something more. And that's something that perhaps they hadn't planned to talk about, or so you can get into a kind of deeper conversation that way. Keep it casual. Yeah, I think so. I don't think we need any kind of formality around this kind of conversation. And I think what Rob suggests is to ignore compliments. So if you do get to talk about the idea that you have or the solution that you're proposing, and they say, yeah, that's really great, I really love that idea, don't believe what they're saying, because it could just be this kind of compulsion to say nice things to the person that's asking questions. So you need to really kind of be able to interpret what they're saying. The book has loads more detail in this. It's really practical the way it's written. It's got kind of dialogues and stuff to listen out for. So definitely read the book to get more of that, and the first half in particular. I love this bit. This is, for me, this is like the best quote I can take out of the book, and then this is word for word what kind of Rob Fitzpatrick has written. So it boils down to this: you aren't allowed to tell them what their problem is, and in return, they aren't allowed to tell you what to build. They own the problem, you own the solution, and I really like that, because I think it kind of tackles this whole elephant in the room about market research. Shouldn't be asking people what they want. We should be providing something that they want. And I think that's absolutely right. You shouldn't be kind of relying on customers, prospective customers, in order to tell you what to do, to tell you what to build. They don't know what they want. What you can do is obviously listen and ask them about a problem that they have, and they can tell you all about that in great detail. And then you use that as your stimulus to come up with the best solution that you can. So let them own the problem, and you own the solution. I really like that. So what next? I think if you definitely read the book. I think definitely read the first half of the book if that's all you can spare. It's a really good read. It's really practical and a very, very kind of, it's a well-written book, I think, as well. Business books are often a bit difficult to read. I find this one's very easy to read, and I think from that you can create yourself an interview guide. If you're going to go ahead with interviews as your research, as a way of kind of delivering questions to customers and prospective customers, then create yourself a semi-structured interview guide. I've got plenty. If you want one to kind of start with, I can give you an example one, but the guide is the reason it's semi-structured is because you don't have to stick to it. It's not a script by any stretch. You can go off script. You can go and explore particular interesting areas. Every conversation is slightly different, because every person's experience is different. So for some interviews, they'll be really, really detailed in one area and less so in another. For another interview, it'll be completely the other way around. But if you have that kind of interview guide to hand, then you can ensure that you're covering off the right kind of questions and you're not going to kind of lose track. So just have that next to you, get used to it, change it. As those interviews build, you can change the questions that you're asking. You can change the emphasis, reorder it, whatever you want to do. But before you go out there and do it, test it. Test it with colleagues, with friends, with your mum and dad. Improve it slightly, test it again, improve it. So when you actually go out and speak to customers and prospective customers, you'll have done a bit of testing, you'll have practiced what you want to say. The first few interviews undoubtedly will be not the best, but you'll get better as you go through. Okay, delivery. This is where I think the book, maybe it could expand a little bit more for me as a kind of as a sort of research person. So I think one of the things I've get a little bit frustrated with some of the advice that's out there for startups is the emphasis on the customer interview. And don't get me wrong, customer interviews are fantastic. They're a really good vehicle for having those really interesting conversations with customers, but they take time. They're one-on-one. You need to do a dozen, maybe more, to really start to understand the subject matter of the problem that you're trying to explore. So they necessarily take time because it's one-on-one, right? They're also, and just looking at this slide, they're not the best way of measuring things. If you want to measure the total market opportunity, if you want to gauge statistically the kind of level of interest in your solution, or validate the problem, I don't think interviews are necessarily the right way to do it. They'll give you lots of detail, but they won't tell you, they won't give you the kind of size. They won't be able to measure things. I won't go through everything on this slide, but sometimes discussions are better than one-to-one conversations, because sometimes the problem that you're trying to solve is better, and you get more. You get a real dynamic from having that kind of group discussion, because people can disagree with each other or agree with each other, or ideas kind of bounce back and forth. So think about maybe having more than one person in that kind of interview situation, and creating a group discussion. And actually that's a good way of getting through more people more quickly. Experiments, another area. There's lots to kind of I can reference there and kind of follow up if anyone's interested, particularly in running more experiments. But that might be a landing page, and you could drive traffic to that landing page and just kind of test some things out. There's platforms available where you can kind of listen to what the chatter is on social media, on forums like Reddit. So yeah, consider the customer interview, but maybe consider other things as well, and find the right tool for the right job. That's the first thing on the kind of next mini checklist, is to make sure you're using the right way of delivering your questions that are going to help your business develop and move on. There's loads of tech around. If you were to do interviews or focus groups, there's loads of tech that can provide like auto transcriptions, live transcriptions. So if you can, the more of that kind of technology that can use and just make your life easier, when you come back to doing the analysis on those interviews or those focus groups, to have a transcription that you can read through is really handy. Of course, AI is also potentially really useful if you want to if you've got all of that dense text and you just want a quick summary, try an AI tool. And certainly, depending on the platform you're using, say you're doing a survey, really important to test it before you launch it. I've had many situations in my luckily not recently, but years past, where you send out a client survey and then you realize, oh, we've missed out a question, or it's not quite right, and actually that's a problem that's very difficult to fix. So thoroughly test things before you go live. People, the next thing you need for research. People, where I think, again, this is where the book for me takes a slightly different tangent, and Rob Fitzpatrick talks much more about kind of sales interactions here, and how he talks about finding people, but he talks very much about finding people through I guess by using your sales process. So cold calling, creating speaking events or attending speaking events, conferences, writing blog posts, landing pages, using tapping into your network, universities, all sorts of things. And for me, this feels great if for sales activity, but it's quite an intensive way of a labor-intensive way of finding people to do research. And this is the point I was making earlier, that for me, as a researcher, I do feel it important to kind of separate the two. So keep research for research, keep sales for sales. I think the biggest reason for me saying that would be that I feel like you're in a very different mode as a participant to when you're comfortable and when you're being told that this is a research kind of conversation, compared to when it feels like a sales conversation, when maybe you're being a bit more guarded. And I guess what you're really looking for from a research conversation is as much truth and honesty as you can, and you're going to get more of that when the participant is at ease and that they trust you. And if you present the whole interaction as a piece of research, and that you're not trying to sell to them, I think that just helps kind of lower their guard and helps them to be a little bit more honest with you. That's my opinion. There'll be other opinions, I guess, when you're running a startup and you're trying to do everything all at once, and often you're doing it yourself. Maybe sales and research have to somehow overlap or become part of the same process. So just I guess think about that. I would say if you are following the path, the more kind of pure research side of things, then there are various ways that you can get people to take part in your research. And I've just put a few here. Like, you might have a mailing list. Fantastic. If you have, approach those people. It's another way to engage with your mailing list is to ask them to take part in a survey, or to do some interviews, or take part in a focus group. But of course, it's not going to be the best way to find particular segments. So if you're looking for people that aren't already aware of your business or your brands or your products, then your mailing list is obviously the wrong place to go. So it very much depends on what you're trying to do. You can tap into your network. Again, a little bit hit and miss. Are you going to find the right type of people? Does your network have your target audience within it or not? Perhaps not. Online advertising, I personally haven't used this approach, but I know if you're comfortable with online ads and you're running campaigns, that might just be an easy way of kind of targeting people and encouraging them to take part in research. Or you can outsource it. And if you imagine the time it might take you to find people, and if you put a value on that time, then you can kind of cost out whether it's worth outsourcing or not, right? Because if it takes you 5 hours to find a bunch of people to take part in your research, and your time is worth X, then 5 times X is what you can spend on outsourcing it to somebody else. So maybe let somebody else kind of take the strain. You can give them a very, very detailed specification of exactly who you're looking for, from demographics, behaviors, attitudes, locations, and they will come back to you with the right people. If you wanted to have a conversation about that, afterwards, then I'm very happy to do so. Okay, so last mini checklist in terms of people. I think a decision needs to be made for your business, and what's best is whether you're going to keep research and sales separate, which is what I would do, or whether whether it makes more sense to kind of combine them together and maybe make those early conversations more kind of researchy, more about finding out about the problem, and maybe that those later conversations become more salesy, less research. I think use a method of finding participants, or if in the case of if you're doing a sort of sales research combo, the leads, and figure out what works for you. What's the best way of finding the right people for you? And I guess just go out there and do it. I think it's worth giving it a go. If you can get the right kind of questions, if you can deliver that in the right way and find the right people, then you're certainly much more than halfway there to doing some good research. As I said, a quick word from our sponsor. So we at Customer IQ, we are a team now. I have an intern working with me, and I have a support person. So we're definitely a team. We have a range of things that we can offer, services and products, from kind of coaching you through your DIY research. So at the moment I'm testing that out as a kind of beta test, and that will be ready to launch hopefully in July. We can do kind of pitch ready research, which would typically be a kind of survey based approach, capturing some detail, measuring the size of the problem you're trying to solve, the size of the market. Or we can offer kind of fully outsourced, fully remote research projects. So that's enough of that. I wasn't intending to kind of use this time to sell, but I think it's important to let you know. Thank you for your time. We have ended a good 5 minutes before 6. So if there are any questions, happy to take them. If not, then Tom, you got a question?
I do, if that's all right. What I was thinking while you were speaking was, what are the false economies in this that you think we should guard against? Because you've given us some flex, and I appreciate you're doing a great job of trying to get us into at least attempting this. But what are the pitfalls? Because you've kind of gone, well, you can do this and you come up with your sales, and I'm thinking, I don't know. There's some things you're saying, and I'm going, I want to know what not. I want you to tell me what. Don't do this. Whatever you do, try to think. But what are the things we shouldn't do? What are the worst pitfalls?
Well, I guess if you think about the way that I've broken down that kind of research into those 3 areas, I guess each of those things could be easily a kind of tripwire for you. So if you're not asking the right kind of questions, if you're focusing too much on your product and why it's great, and if you're listening, like as kind of it says in the book, if you're listening to those positive murmurs and those that feedback that says, yes, this is great, I really like this, and you're taking that face value, then that's going to lead you down a particular path. If you're picking the wrong way of delivering those questions to what you actually need.
That's an interesting thing. So so supplemental question, or kind of related, where are we our worst enemy in being able to get the truth? Is it that if we should someone else design the questions, not us, or should someone else ask the questions, not us, or should someone else analyze the questions, not us? If we have to not do one of those 3 things, which is the most beneficial?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I guess it would be at the point of data collection, so it would be the asking the questions.
So we don't just see what we want to hear and go, oh yeah, good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a practical aspect to that, though, right? Isn't there? Because I have conversations with people a lot, and they've gone to a research agency that typically services corporates and big clients, and they've got a quote, and it's astronomical, compared to what they can afford to spend. And that's a real reason, a practical reason why startups will do this themselves. And I guess the fact that the Mom Test is a very well-known book, so hopefully that's having some influence over people. I speak to people who are doing their own research, and I think that benefits them hugely. There are people like me available, I guess, to kind of help advise and ask questions of, provide services like the coaching to help kind of counter some of those things that might go wrong. We've got an Amazon delivery, it's all right, he's left it by the door, bless him. I mean, I think that the real problem is the research industry is far more geared up to service companies that have deep pockets. Yes. And that's understandable too, right? Because why wouldn't you? If that business over there is going to pay you £10,000 to do that research, why would you offer something similar for £2,000 to somebody else? And I think it's difficult sometimes to kind of get access, that kind of expertise. But no, I think in terms of the most crucial stage is probably at that interface where you're collecting the data, where you're having the conversations, or yeah, great questions though. Thank you.
Awesome.
Anything else? No, right. No, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. I've been playing around with the timings of these calls, so I'm not sure whether 5:30 is great or not. It's not brilliant for me because I've got the kids are like banging on the door telling me they're hungry. So I may revert to a morning slot for next time when they're at school. But it's been fantastic having you here. Really appreciate it, and see you at another one hopefully. Take care.
Thanks very much, Gideon. Loved it.
Bye. Bye.